My name is Joe Peroni, and this is the Rise Above Project. And today I want to talk about Charlie Kirk, and I'm also going to talk about the Joshua Bell social experiment, which I think can explain a lot of what we're seeing in the media about Charlie Kirk. So first, let me give you the information about Joshua Bell. He is one of the world's greatest violinists, and he plays a 300-year-old Stradivarius that he bought himself with his own money for $4 million. At 17 years old, he played at Carnegie Hall, and he gets paid about $1,000 a minute when he plays. In 2007, he won a Pulitzer Prize for a social experiment. And this is what I'm going to teach you and how I think or why we're seeing the way people are acting towards Charlie Kirk. So Joshua Bell, he posed as a street performer in Washington, D.C. for 8 hours. And while he was there, he was playing his $4 million Stradivarius violin. During that 8 hours, almost nobody stopped to listen. They just walked by like he was just some homeless guy. And during an 8-hour shift, he earned about $30. So what is that? He earned about $4 an hour. Meanwhile, he usually gets paid $1,000 a minute. So what did this social experiment prove? Or at least what did it highly suggest? Here are the interesting things. It shows that we base people's worth on context, on the setting, on their reputation, on their perceived status, much more than their actual talent or their worth or their significance. So maybe you're a person out there that's not getting the accolades that you deserve. Maybe that you're feeling that you're not worthy because you're not getting any attention in the world. Maybe you're writing books, maybe you're making music, maybe you're doing something artistic and you have no money to show for it. Well, maybe it's not you. Maybe you have all the talent in the world. But who's going to see it if you don't develop that reputation in some way? So it's a hard thing, right? Like in some people, they'll say, well, I need to get a job, and they'll have no experience. But at a job, they want you to have experience. So how do you get experience if nobody's going to hire you? And it's kind of like the same thing here. One of the people that I was thinking about here is Owen Cooper. Owen Cooper is 15 years old. He just won an Emmy for a Netflix series called Adolescence. And I think he's the youngest person ever to win an Emmy. So he's the best actor right now. Okay, but Owen Cooper is not a trained actor. So basically they took a regular guy and they gave him some lines and he was able to just be himself or whatever, and now he won an Emmy. So do we really think that in the world we see people like Matthew McConaughey or whoever, that these are these extra special super people that have these powers that nobody else has? Or were they put in a position of power and everybody thinks they're great because they're just there? How many people out there are artists not getting paid, or they're not getting noticed for the greatness that they're putting out there? There's probably thousands, if not millions. So what's my point with all this? Charlie Kirk was funded by conservative billionaires, conservative organizations and foundations. And so he has this upgraded status now. And his reputation, his status as a smart man of God who encourages honest debates far, far exceeds reality. I mean, the stuff that Charlie Kirk would say on a regular basis, it's nothing more than your drunk uncle wouldn't have said at Thanksgiving after watching maybe Fox News for about a week or so. There's nothing really special going on there. So let's talk a little bit about what Charlie Kirk was supposed to have been pushing. Now, they said he wanted an honest debate. Now, here's where he has some plausible deniability, right? So he would go on a college campus, and he could say, I want to get young people involved in politics. And there's the plausible deniability. So of course, so he's going to be talking or debating with college kids. It makes sense. It looks good on the surface. But here's the thing. Was he really using honest debate tactics? He used conservative talking points that were particularly racist, and he used a flurry of lies against unprepared 18-year-old kids who weren't prepared to have a debate. Now, you don't have to be super intelligent, but if you are debating and talking with people live all the time and you start to get used to being in front of people, you start to get good at it and you have your same talking points over and over. So you could say a flurry of things to somebody and they don't know how to answer you back. For example, if you just talked to somebody randomly on the street and said, what is a man? All of a sudden that question becomes difficult because somebody might say, well, what does it mean? Does it mean someone who has a goatee? Well, no, because not all men have goatees. They could say it's a person who is strong and has values and virtues, but that's not true because there's plenty of women who are strong and have values and virtues. Or somebody might say, well, it's a human being with a prostate. Well, that's not true either because there's plenty of older men that have had their prostates removed. So it's not as easy to get a straightforward answer out of people who are not prepared. So it's easy to play getcha, especially with 18-year-old kids who are scared to death in front of a microphone in front of 1,000 people. This is not an honest debate. And then what he did was he would edit the debates to make the kids look stupid. And the videos went viral because there was a lot of people and they would send it out and everybody thought it was entertaining, which it probably is. But that doesn't mean that it actually teaches anybody anything. And underneath all that is that he was pushing conservative propaganda. He wasn't pushing anything to actually help people because most of what he said were either lies or half lies. Did you ever see him debate a professor? Very, very rarely. Why? Because a professor actually has information, knows how to speak to people, and a professor would destroy him in a debate and has. Have you ever seen him debate an epidemiologist about vaccines? No. Why? Because he can't. Because he can't out-debate an epidemiologist about vaccines. He doesn't know anything. Do you ever see him debate an actual therapist or a social worker about social issues that he thinks he's an expert at? No. Why? Because a social worker or a therapist is going to destroy him because he doesn't have correct information. Would he ever debate a history professor about history? No. There's a reason for that. Because he doesn't know what he's talking about. He's being paid by rich conservatives to push an agenda. And he's taking advantage, or he was taking advantage of 18-year-old kids. So no, he was not trying to have honest debates and just enlighten people. Because he wasn't enlightened himself, and he had a propaganda type of agenda. Was he a man of God? He has said so many divisive things that you could easily say, not a man of God. I know somebody's going to say, well, he knows some scripture. Right. So you could watch movies like Pulp Fiction with Samuel Jackson being a murderer, and before he killed somebody who would always quote some scripture. That does not make you a good guy. Right? So that doesn't mean anything. If you want to know if he's a real man of God, you have to ask yourself too, why is or was Charlie Kirk supported by white supremacists? Because he speaks their language. That's the answer. Now, he does try to get into some social things here, of course, if he knows nothing about. One of the things he said was, he said black people are 13% of the population, but they're 50% of the jail population. Now, on the surface, somebody could say, well, why is that racist? If it's true, it's true. Okay. The first part that is true is that black people are about 13% of the population. However, if you look at the real jail population, it's 31% white, 23% Hispanic, and 32% black. So why would he exaggerate? I don't know. Is he pushing a white supremacy agenda maybe? Is he racist? Seems like it, right? He also said that 13% of black people cause 50% of the crime. But he doesn't understand causation versus correlation. There is no causation, because if somebody has black skin, that doesn't make them a person who's going to commit a crime. That's not the correct correlation here. What we're looking at, or what he should be looking at, which he may understand if he's smart enough, but he also is kind of like an evil, if you want to say he's smart, let's call him an evil genius, because he's trying to push this racist agenda, but is hiding it in a way that looks pretty good. Because the biggest correlation to somebody committing a crime is coming from a low socioeconomic background. So that is really what you're looking at. So you're not looking to see the color of the skin, right? So if a person is middle class and they're black, or they're rich and they're black, the chance of them committing a crime is negligible. Same thing as a rich white person, negligible. Or at least we're talking violent crimes. I mean, white collar crimes are a little bit different. So again, we're looking at him as like he's having an honest debate, but if he's having an honest debate, why doesn't he say that the number one correlation to crime is coming from a low socioeconomic background, which is not predicated on if you're white, Hispanic, or black? And so when he says he's against funding, having meals for children at school, he's against any type of food assistance, and somebody says, well, what happens if you don't have enough food? Which again, if you want a child to do well in school, one of the number one correlations to a child doing well in school is having a full stomach. But he doesn't want that. And his answer is, well, then the parents should just get a job. Well, where is this empathy that he supposedly has? Or this Christian attitude of feeding the poor? Well, because he's not a man of God, right? Jesus did not say, get another job, get a third job, get a fourth job, whatever. Or if your child is hungry, too bad. It's about feeding the poor, feeding the hungry. And he said, no, don't do that. Why? Because he thinks that we don't have, and he actually said we don't have a hunger problem in the United States. We have an obesity problem in the United States. Okay, but can two things be true at the same time? Yes, because again, he's not a personal trainer and he's not in the health field. Anybody in the health field can tell you this, right? So we do have an obesity epidemic in this country, but we also have a lot of people who go to bed hungry at the same time. And here's the thing, and I've been a trainer since 1985, that's 40 years, and I could tell you the same thing that most trainers could tell you if they were being honest. It's a lot easier for a person who has a lot of money to be healthy and to be lean. Because if you want to have low body fat, you have to have a decent amount of muscle. And the only way you gain muscle is obviously through physical activity, but you also need protein. Chicken, fish, tuna, turkey, egg whites, and protein powder, or protein powder. If you're poor, you're not going to go down to the GNC and spend $80 on a tub of protein powder. That's not happening. You're not going to sit there and weigh out and have 6 to 8 ounce servings of protein 6 times a day, you're not doing that. So poor people, if they have any muscle at all, it's because of genetics. It's not because they're eating well to support that. That's not going to happen. On average, you want about 1 gram of protein for every pound of body weight. That's not going to happen. They're not doing that. They can't eat like that. And then if you want good carbs, they can't afford good carbs. They're going and getting white bread. They're getting cornflakes. They're getting what's cheap and plentiful. So what happens when you eat garbage and sugar all day because it's cheap and that's all you can afford? You get fat. So again, yes, we have an obesity problem, but there aren't lean, muscular people with V-shapes in poor areas. Not often, very rare. Most of the time, they're overweight. And even if they look like they're thin, they're skinny fat because they have no muscle on their body because they can't support it with their diet. Charlie Kirk knows nothing about health and fitness. Why are we listening to him? Well, part of the reason why I'm doing this show today is to show you why. It's the Joshua Bell experiment of what he has already shown you. One of the world's most renowned violinists can play the most expensive violin in the world and sit there for free on the street playing, and nobody will listen to him. Nobody will stop because they don't know him as a famous guy. They don't know him as the reputation. They can hear him and know beyond a shadow of a doubt that he's an amazing virtuoso. But it still doesn't matter because he's not famous and he doesn't have followers and people don't know who he is. And that's the way America is. So we put Charlie Kirk on this pedestal because he's famous, not because he's smart, not because he's a good guy, not because he helps people, not because he's an honest person and having honest conversations with young people. I've heard him over and over again try to tell young people that they should not go to college. Good move, man. You made a whole generation of young men stupid and poor. Way to go. Awesome. And a guy like that will have more influence than I ever will. And all of my friends and all of the workers that I'm with as therapists, he'll have more influence. Good for him. But this is where we go in this country. We only want to look and we serve these rich people. And by the way, he did a lot of hard work, don't get me wrong. But again, going back to the beginning, he would not have gotten where he got to without millions of dollars backing him up. To go back to the black crime for a second, which he doesn't mention, is that not only is the biggest correlation not skin color, like he tries to tell you, like the racist that he is. Again, it's the low socioeconomic background. Of course, the policies that he pushes takes away health care from poor people, takes away food assistance for poor people. So he's literally going out of his way to hurt people. Why are we lionizing him? But this is also interesting when we look at white people versus black people in terms of going to jail. Black people are far more likely to be exonerated for a crime. In other words, they've been put in jail for a crime they didn't commit and they end up getting let out. So we have to add that in. And we also have to add that when a black person and a white person do the same crime, juries are much more likely to give a black person a much more harsh sentence. And we could also add that white people do tend to get better help from better lawyers, or at least they try harder for white people. You can look at this too. When we look at the shooter of Charlie Kirk, he's a white guy. When it's a white guy, we tend to go, oh, I wonder what happened in his background. Oh my God, like, was he radicalized by social media? You know, what should we do? Maybe it was the video games. Maybe it was whatever, something he watched on TV. You know, maybe we should somehow censor what these young kids are watching. Not that 22 is a young kid anymore. But if he was black, we would say he's a piece of garbage as a human being and he needs to get executed, right? And by the way, let's not forget, talking about executions, Charlie Kirk said he was for public executions. How weird. So am I going to get in trouble now for saying that he got publicly executed? I'm literally saying a fact. He was publicly executed, but he was pro-public executions. He also called for Joe Biden to be executed. And you could say, well, I got that off of a meme. No, I did not. I actually heard him say it. I watched some of his shows because I like to see what some of these propagandists are doing. Okay, as a marriage and family therapist, I'm very into psychology, obviously. And I get very interested in this. This is nothing new. People like Charlie Kirk are not these really smart, intelligent people. They follow the playbook. All you have to do, and test me on this, go up and look for Joseph Goebbels, who was the Nazi propagandist for the Nazi Party, and Hitler. And you could see it. Say a lie, and say it as often as possible, and it becomes the truth. And when you lie, lie big, and people will have a more chance to believe it when it's a big lie. So, it just keeps going. Try to control the media, try to control the airwaves, which is what they're doing. And so again, Charlie Kirk was not much more than just a regular, run-of-the-mill, white nationalist propagandist. That's it. Nothing more than that. Was he a father? Yes, but a lot of evil people were fathers, so that doesn't mean anything. And he had a wife, and you know, yes, he did. Hitler was married to Eva Braun. That didn't make him a good guy. Like, I don't know why we can't have normal conversations here. And people are like, oh my God, don't say anything bad about him. I don't have to say anything bad about him. Just quote exactly what he said, and that's enough. And that's enough to get these Republicans angry. It's like, don't you dare say what he actually said. Why? Why are you so much into a cult that you can't have a normal conversation about things anymore? Anyway, we're 22 minutes in. That's good enough for today. My name is Joseph Peroni. This is the Rise Above Project. Please subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.